welcome to Organizations as Objects, or as this talk was called in the abstract that I submitted for the conference, how do organizations metaphysically relate to their members? So what I want to do in this talk is answer the following question. If organizations are more than a useful fiction, then where are they in the natural world? And the goal of the paper is to analyze the relationship between organizations and their members so as to answer that question. Now, this paper isn't actually a paper, it's the early chapters of a book that I'm working on. The book's called Organizations as Wrongdoers. And the goal of the book is to incorporate organizations into our moral, social, political practices of blame and punishment, including things like reactive attitudes and so on. To that end then, in this talk, I'm treating organizations as objects, but I'm treating them as objects that are agents. And so that means some of my conclusions might differ than when we're thinking of organizations as objects that aren't agents. Okay, should say as well that due to time constraints, I'm not going to address anyone else's theories of organizations, including people who might be watching this talk, but I'm very happy to do so in the chat or live Q&A. Okay, so I'm going to start by laying out some desiderata on an analysis of the organization-member relation. So the first desideratum is materiality. So as I've just said, I'm seeking an analysis that renders organizations material objects locatable in the natural world. I've tasked myself, right, with producing organizations' materiality, producing their physical presence by analyzing organizations' relationship to their members. So the production of that materiality, the production of organizations as material objects in the world of tables and chairs is a desideratum for my analysis of the organization-member relation. Okay. Second thing that we want an analysis of the organization-member relation to do is we want it to produce membership as an internal thing. So members are internal to organizations, and our account of the organization-member relation should capture that. This means that the relationship between organizations and their members can't just be a relation of supervenience or causation or grounding or anchoring, because on all of those relations, the things that stand in the relation are not necessarily one being internal to the other. Third desideratum is overlap. So we want our analysis of membership to allow for the possibility that two distinct organizations can have all and only the same members. So one example that gets brought up in the literature, and Kathrin Koslicki, for example, talks about it, is the chess club and the nature club. So it could be, right, that the chess club and the nature club have all the same members. We want to be able to say nonetheless that they are different organizations. So our analysis of the membership relation should allow us to say that those are different organizations, even if they have all the same members. Fourth desideratum, non-transitivity. Our analysis shouldn't make membership transitive. So the following should be at least conceptually possible, given the concept of membership. I'm a member of New Zealand. New Zealand is a member of the UN, but I'm not a member of the UN. Okay, our analysis of membership should kind of allow that that's possible. Fifth, non-circularity. Our analysis of membership should not define membership in terms of membership. Otherwise, it's just not a very useful or informative analysis. So, for example, our analysis shouldn't be the members are whoever are designated as members, because then member is on the left and right-hand side of the analysis. Not very helpful. Sixth desideratum, agency. So members of organizations, I'm assuming, are agents. Seventh and finally, final thing we want our analysis to do, non-conventionality. So this goes against what I think of as a trend in the recent literature. So I think membership is not whatever the law or practice or the organization's charter says membership is. So the UN couldn't just suddenly say, Steph's a member of the UN without changing my relationship to the UN in any way in terms of, you know, the inputs that I have into the UN's decisions and stuff like that. Why I think that this desideratum holds? Well, we don't defer to, when we're thinking of individuals as agents, we don't defer to whatever the law says an agent is or whatever our current social practices happen to say individuals are as agents, or whatever kind of, I don't know, the charters of our local institutions say an agent is. We don't defer to those things. When we're doing the metaphysics of individual agency, we think those things can get it wrong. So I think we also shouldn't defer to these things when we're drawing lines around organizational agents. Now notice that this desideratum doesn't deny that organizations are socially constructed in some sense, and it'll become clear when I give my positive proposal, the sense in which I mean this desideratum to hold. I'm not denying that organizations are socially constructed, but I'm denying that how they are constructed is a question only for like empirical social scientists, that it's something that we can just read off our current laws or practices. Okay, those are the desiderata. Here's my proposal that's going to satisfy the desiderata. So the basic proposal is this. The relationship between members and organizations is one of material parthood. So members are the material parts or constituents of organizations. My suggestion is that all material parts of an organization are either members or parts of members. So for example, my nose is a part of New Zealand because I'm a member of New Zealand and my nose is a part of me. Organizations also have parts that are non-material or that aren't constituents or that are structural. And these non-material structural parts of an organization are things like the organization's charter or structure or procedure. So in giving this proposal, I'm drawing heavily on the work of Kathrin Koslicki, her account of ordinary objects, which is roughly the following. So some objects, M1 to Mn, constitute an object O, just in case M1 to Mn are O's material components, which is to say that M1 to Mn are those among O's proper parts which satisfy the constraints dictated by O's formal components, F1 to Fn. Okay, so that's obviously quite kind of formulaic, not that substantive, because like he uses the analogy of a recipe to explain how this works, right? So the recipe is like the formal components. The recipe of a table says that you have to have some legs and they have to stand kind of vertically, and then you have to have this kind of top which goes across the legs and stands horizontally, whatever. That's like recipe for a table. That formal aspect of a table is a part of the table, not a material part, it's an immaterial part of the table. And then the physical legs and top are the constituents of the table. They are the material parts of the table. The recipe, that is the formal components, specify the arrangement, the variety, and perhaps the number of the material components or constituents that make up an object. So Koslicki obviously here is drawing on Aristotle to give an analysis of ordinary objects. She focuses a lot on motorcycles and hammers and things like that. My suggestion is that this applies to organizations, but I think we're going to need to add some stuff to it in order to satisfy all the desiderata, and that's what's kind of new in my proposal. So Koslicki's system makes the organization's charter or structure or procedures significant, which makes them kind of a part of the object, even though they are immaterial. And I think this is good and makes her account preferable to accounts that construe organizations as sets or fusions or pluralities of individuals. It's good to include the structure as a part of the organization, I think, because the charter does explanatory work, both inwards for explaining what it is that material parts do, and outwards for explaining the effects that the organization as a whole has on things outside of the organization. Also, as we'll see on the next slide, the immaterial parts are going to be important for satisfying desideratum 3, which is going to be difficult to satisfy if we think of organizations as sets or fusions or pluralities. Okay, so that's Koslicki in a nutshell and how I want to apply her to organizations. I think, now I'm going to talk about how this helps us to satisfy the desiderata. So by applying Koslicki's account to organizations, we kind of automatically satisfy the first 3 desiderata. So we satisfy desideratum 1, we get organizations materiality. How do we get that? Well, constitution is a material relation. So then when we're trying to talk about organizations as objects in the world, we say they are made of people in the same way that a table is made of legs and a top, right? So we've got the materiality of organizations. It's the materiality of the members that make up the organization. Also, by applying Koslicki's account to organizations, we satisfy desideratum 2. Parthood is an internal relation, unlike supervenience and causation and grounding and anchoring. And we satisfy desideratum 3. Organizations with the same members are distinct via the immaterial formal components. It's those immaterial or formal components that allow us to distinguish the chess club from the nature club. They have all the same members, they have all the same material components, but they have different immaterial or structural components because they have different recipes for making up a chess club versus making up a nature club. Okay, now, so far so good, maybe so familiar in a way, but I think to satisfy the remaining desiderata of the 7 desiderata that I introduced, we're going to have to say more about who the members of an organization are. We're going to have to say that the members are those of an organization's material parts that satisfy some kind of extra conditions, where those conditions are non-transitive, satisfying desideratum 4, non-circular, satisfying desideratum 5, agential, satisfying desideratum 6, and non-conventional, thereby satisfying desideratum 7. Now, it's important here that I want to separate out being a member of an organization from being a part of an organization, or material part of an organization. So the thought is organizations have immaterial parts, which I've talked about, the structure, the recipe, how the material parts are arranged. They also have material parts. I've suggested that all of an organization's material parts are either members or parts of members, but that means not all of an organization's material parts are members. Not all of an organization's material parts will meet these extra conditions that I'm going to add on to for an account of membership that are going to allow us to meet desiderata 4 to 7. Specifically, so to get a little more concrete, the material parts of members will not satisfy the conditions for being members. So think about New Zealand. Let's assume for a second that I'm a member of New Zealand. So as I said, so my nose is a part of New Zealand, but my nose is not a member of New Zealand because my nose will not satisfy these extra conditions that I'm going to propose for membership that are going to allow us to satisfy desiderata 4 to 7 on an analysis of membership. Okay, so to illustrate, so suppose I'm a member of New Zealand and suppose New Zealand is a member of the UN. So then I'm a material part of the agent that is the UN, and so is my nose. Me and my nose are each material parts of the UN because we are each parts of a member of the UN, i.e. New Zealand, where members are also material parts, and parthood is transitive, right? So my nose is a part of me, I'm a part of New Zealand, New Zealand's a part of the UN. That means my nose is a part of the UN and I'm part of the UN. But although parthood is transitive in that way, membership is not transitive. Membership allows parts of members to become parts of the organizations that members are parts of, but it doesn't mean that the parts are themselves members. Okay, my nose isn't a member of the UN, it's merely a part of the UN. That's the suggestion. So neither I nor my nose are members of the UN, since neither of us meets the extra conditions that I'm about to lay out that make a part into a member and that allow our account of membership to satisfy desiderata 4, 5, 6, and 7. Okay, so recall the idea is all material parts of an organization are either members or parts of members. I've got a flag here as well. In the interest of giving a 20-minute presentation, I'm kind of here just laying out the view. I'm kind of arguing for it insofar as I hope that the desiderata are relatively intuitive and plausible, and I'm showing that, hey, this account satisfies these desiderata. Like, that's the argument for the view, but I'm here kind of in this 20-minute presentation restricting myself to describing the view rather than full-blown defending it. Okay, anyway, that's the proposal. All the material parts of the organization are either members or parts of members. Okay, so then we need these extra conditions that are going to allow us to distinguish the members from the mere parts and distinguish the members from the external stuff, and where those extra conditions are going to allow us to satisfy the remaining desiderata 4 to 7. So the extra conditions are these. Members are those material parts that satisfy the following. So I'll just lay them out. So there's the commitment condition, the inputs condition, and the enactment condition. So first of all, the commitment condition. The part, the object, the thing that is a member is psychologically committed, maybe tacitly and pro tanto, to abide by the results of the organization's decision-making procedures. B, the inputs condition, the beliefs and preferences that an organization's decision-making procedure takes as inputs, and the way the procedure processes those inputs to form decisions systematically and intentionally derive from actions of the actions that the part, the object, the member, is permitted by their role to perform. Those actions might be things like deference to other members, votes in elections, meeting contributions, whatever. I'm very loose and happy to be very permissive and informal about exactly what form a decision-making procedure takes. I don't think it has to involve just voting or whatever. Okay. It's the inputs condition. And third, the enactment condition. The enactment of some of the organization's feasible decisions requires actions from the part where those actions are attributable to the organization. So very quickly, an illustration is a citizen of a democratic state. So this, I should say, is quite a contentious example of a member. So I'm using this example to demonstrate kind of the minimal, the lowest possible bar for being a member. So this is like the minimal, the bare scraping by case of a member, I think, is the relationship between a citizen and a democratic state. They citizens just squeak in as members. Okay, so a citizen of a democratic state meets the commitment condition. She's mostly, and not all citizens, but many citizens are going to be counted as members of their state, because mostly, by and large, they're going to be psychologically committed to abide by the state's laws. They're going to have inputs into the state's decisions, votes, petitions, protests, and so on. And there are going to be some actions on the part of the state that require actions from that part. So, for example, the election of a new government is going to require actions from the voters, from the citizens. Not all citizens, of course, have to vote in order for us to get a new government, but at least some of them do. And we could imagine, if if not enough people turn up, then it's going to be necessary that you go out and vote. So the enactment, the state's action of electing a new government is going to require actions from you if you're a citizen, and that makes you a member. Okay. So those are the three conditions, I think, that make an object a member of an organization. And with those three conditions, then we're able to draw quite firm lines around exactly where an organization is, exactly who's included and exactly who is excluded, and exactly what the parts are, because all of the parts are either those people or the parts of those people. That's the suggestion. Okay, so these extra conditions then allow us to satisfy the remaining desiderata. So we satisfy desideratum 4, which is non-transitivity of membership, because at the very least, the third condition, the enactment condition, is not going to be transitive. It could be true that, so some of New Zealand's actions require actions from me, but probably none of the UN's actions require actions from me. So, so these conditions A to C are not going to be transitive. We satisfy desideratum 5. These extra conditions do not mention membership at all, so our account is non-circular, which is good. We satisfy desideratum 6, that members are agents, because you can't satisfy conditions A to C unless you're an agent. Condition A requires commitments, which I assume only agents can do, and conditions B and C require actions, which I assume only agents can do. Finally, these extra conditions allow us to satisfy desideratum 7, and allow me to say a bit more about that desideratum. So the satisfaction of these extra conditions does depend upon practices and charters, right? So organizations are socially constructed in that sense, in that I can only be a member of New Zealand if New Zealand cares about how I vote or protest, right? So then I'm going to meet the inputs condition. And that's going to be a question of the practices and laws and charters that are in place in that organization. So the meeting of conditions A to C does depend upon laws and practices and charters and whatnot, but it's not that conditions A to C are laid down necessarily in an organization's practices and charters, right? Or in any laws that govern organizations. So conditions A to C kind of hold independently of the practices, but it's the practices that enable us to satisfy those conditions. Okay, so laws, practices, and charters understandings of membership might depart from A to C, and in that sense, our account of the organization member relation is non-conventional in the right kind of way. Okay. All right, so before I close, an objection. This kind of comes from Rubens, who in the 1980s kind of had this kind of worry. So if members are material parts of organizations, then the organizations are partly wherever their members are. So my university, say ACU, suppose I'm a member of ACU, suppose I meet the three conditions. ACU goes away on holiday with me. in the magical world where I'm allowed to go away to go on holiday. That's like wild that I go away on holiday to Fiji, suddenly part of ACU is in Fiji. That seems weird. Here's my reply to this objection. ACU, my university, is only partly present and it's dormant in Fiji when I go on holiday to Fiji. So here's an analogy. Let's think about me as an agent. So we could ask the question, am I under the table as I give this talk? Now, I am partly under the table. My legs are under the table. And the part of me that's under the table is dormant. It's not, the actions that I'm currently performing don't really depend on the parts of me that are under the table. So we wouldn't say that I'm under the table if we were asked, probably, but I partly and dormantly am under the table. And I want to say the same is true for ACU at my holiday destination. ACU is partly and dormantly in Fiji when I go on holiday to Fiji. There's more to be said about what it takes for a part to be dormant and so on. Because I'm running out of time, I'm gonna save that for the Q&A if people want to hear about that. For now, I'm going to conclude. So if group agents are more than a useful fiction, then where are they in the natural world? I've suggested that they are wherever and only wherever their members and their members' parts are. This kind of begs us for a answer to the question of who the members are. I've suggested that an object is a member just in case it meets 3 conditions: the commitment condition, the input condition, and the enactment condition. And thank you. I will stop there and really looking forward to talking with everyone about this idea. Thanks.